Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Kurt Moody, and I'm the Director of Professional Education at Johnson & Johnson Vision. And I'm really pleased to have you here with us this evening because we've got a pretty special presentation for you. We'd like to kind of unlock some of the keys to being really successful at fitting ACUVUE Oasis Multifocal. Now, keep in mind, these keys that we're going to go over today are just as relevant if you're doing our one-day ACUVUE Moist Multifocal. Both products are very, very fortunate in the fact that they use the same optical system that we have, our pupil optimized design. They leverage the same back curve that we have, and you're going to probably get very, very similar results. You as the doctor will decide if you've got a moist patient in your chair or an Oasis. We're very fortunate that we have with us a special guest, Dr. Brad Giedd. Let me tell you just a little bit about Dr. Giedd. As you see, he's in a specialty contact lens and clinical research practice right around the Orlando area. And he's done probably a little greater than 200 clinical trials involving contact lenses, lens care products, and pharmaceutical products. We're very privileged also in the fact that he is one of our Johnson & Johnson professional affairs consultants. So Dr. Giedd, if you want to maybe just give us a little background on your practice and even more importantly, say hello.
Sure. Well, thank you. And yeah, welcome to everybody this afternoon or evening or wherever we're watching this. But yeah, honored to be here. I've had a great relationship with Johnson & Johnson, been privileged to work clinical trials and spending some time on that for over 20 years. So it's been a great experience from the days of the first ACUVUE Oasis to True Eye to one-day moist multifocal. I've been, privileged to kind of have a hand in all of it. So excited to be here, talk about the lens. It's a mainstay in my practice, my #1 multifocal. Very happy to have the Oasis 2. That's been a real hit in my practice as well. So we've got some good things to share for you tonight.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Giedd. And one of the things we're going to do that's going to be just a little bit different, maybe you might be wondering why Dr. Giedd is sitting there in his exam chair, in his exam office. It's because we're going to actually do some live demos tonight. So again, unlock some of those keys so that you could be a real successful lens fitter with our multifocal system. Let me first of all just kind of go into the why. Why is this so important? And I think this slide sums it up quite nicely. If we look at that typical optometric practice, about 40% of your current wearer base are either presbyopic now or they will be within the next 1 to 2 years. Going out and surveying those patients, we find out 94% of them tell us that they hope, anticipate, expect to still be wearing contact lenses well into their 6th decade of life. So right there is the perfect scenario for an optometrist. You've got a large group of patients and they want to stay on contact lenses. Unfortunately, that little bubble on the right is what's actually happening. 1 out of every 2 of those patients will drop out within the next 2 years. And we know that when they're in those presbyopic years, the reason for that is dryness, discomfort, and vision. So we believe, especially now, having a multifocal with our unique optical approach in the Cenefilcon material, in that Oasis material, will make you or give you the opportunity that you will not be losing 1 out of every 2 patients. All of that, of course, is predicated on the basis that you become proficient at fitting the lenses. And again, we're going to unlock some of those keys on how you could become really good at fitting these lenses. I'm showing you right now what we believe are the 3 great innovative technologies that we've done in this particular contact lens. As I've mentioned once or twice already, that pupil optimized design, the optical approach, what that's delivering is that clear, crisp vision. We've created a unique back curve on this lens, and that back curve, what we call a hybrid back curve, is doing 2 things. It's preserving these really, really sophisticated optics on the front surface of the lens and making sure the lens always fits over the optical center of the cornea. And then, as I've already mentioned, putting this into the material that's never been beaten in regards to comfort. Cenefilcon, the Oasis material, kind of rounds everything up. I think there's a great way for me to sum this up even better, and that's the fact we actually have a little video that I'm going to play that really, I think, encompasses what we've got in these technologies. So I'll play it for you right now.
Finding a multifocal lens that provides consistent success across patients, no matter their age or refraction, can be a challenge. Introducing ACUVUE Multifocal Contact Lenses with pupil-optimized design, a combination of 3 exceptional technologies to deliver consistent performance and comfort regardless of age or refractive error. We start with a unique optical profile designed to achieve an extended depth of focus to provide crisp, clear vision near, far, and in between. Additionally, we know that the effectiveness of some multifocals may be reduced when pupil size and optical profile are mismatched. A larger pupil size may result in poor near vision. A smaller pupil size may lead to poor far vision. While most manufacturers optimize optical profile size by age, ACUVUE understands pupil size changes, not only by age, but by up to 24% by refraction alone. So while the leading competitor stops at providing only 3 optical profile sizes, giving less than 2% of parameters optimized, ACUVUE optimizes 100% of the 183 optical power profiles by both age and refraction. With a hybrid back curve to help ensure the optimized optics stay centered over the pupil, and infused with a proprietary wetting agent for exceptional all-day comfort, ACUVUE has created lenses designed for consistent performance and comfort, regardless of age or refractive error, that you can fit in 3 easy steps. Automatically getting the best optical power profile for your patient's most likely pupil size.
And as I mentioned, I think that video really summarizes it quite well. It talks a little bit about those 3 critical steps, and we will be getting to those 3 critical steps in just a minute. But I think it's always very impactful when we actually see real world data. And I had asked Dr. Giedd if he wouldn't mind, if he could go back and maybe pull his last 10 fits, summarize those for us. And that's what we have right now. So Dr. Giedd, if you don't mind, maybe just summarize some of these findings, let the audience know a little bit about the type of patients you're seeing and the type of success you're getting, whether it's the Oasis multifocal or the Moist.
Certainly, yeah. The great thing is that, we always want to look at our success rate. And I think even just pulling these 10 last fits, we found that our success rate was right where we had hoped it would be, with 9 out of 10 of these last fits being successful. But when you look a little deeper, and when I really spent some time digging into the data, a lot more occurred to me. I could probably spend 30, 40 minutes talking about it. But the first thing when I go down each row is I find first with the age that I was fitting a multitude of age ranges, anywhere from 40 all the way up to patients in their 60s. And certainly I even have some patients beyond that on both ends, some a little younger and even some a little older than that. So we were able to fit a wide variety of patients in one of these 2 products. And I think if you go back in time a little bit for some of the practitioners like myself who've been around a little longer, you remember a time when, there were certain products that you did a little better with for maybe a hyperope or a myope or a lower early presbyope or a later presbyope. So the fact that we can fit patients of all ages, and again, you see also myopes and hyperopes, 3 hyperopes in this sample, probably a little more than I would have expected to find based on how many more myopes I see. But those early hyperopes, patients you see number 10 down there, a low hyperope who's been probably struggling with no prescription, just finally had enough, needs a little help. A perfect candidate for this design because we can meet their needs for both far and close, and they've been walking around blurry to begin with. You see that we fit some very high myopes in this cohort. Really a good range of prescriptions, again, low myopes, low hyperopes, high myopes, moderate hyperopes. So we just probably didn't see any high hyperopes, but every type of patient you can probably pick from a prescription standpoint was found in this simple 10 patient cohort. And patients who had never worn contact lenses, we had a few neophytes. We converted some patients from monovision. And even though that was our one failure, I would say that in this case, I wouldn't probably even call it a failure. It's probably overstating it because that patient still was wearing an ACUVUE product. They just chose to stick with monovision, at least for now. The 2 other monovision patients were experiencing some sort of deficiency. And so we were able to give them the far, intermediate, and close that they were needing when they were maybe not getting all of that with their monovision arrangement. And of course, distance wearers with readers, there just comes a point in time when a lot of those patients are just done trying to find those darn reading glasses. So, you know, again, a lot of data here, but when you really look at the age, the demographics, you look at the myopia versus hyperopia, the degree, and then the different types of devices these patients were using, we really fit a pretty broad scope of patients in just this simple 10 patient cohort. So, you know, we're really pleased with the success we've had with these products. And the only thing we're missing is the one-day silicone hydrogel product. And I don't know if that's part of our conversation tonight, but even more opportunity on the way.
It is, and you're right, it is on the way very, very soon. You know, the one thing I'd call out, Dr. Giedd, that I really liked about the data too, because so often, you know, when I've given these talks, and I know when you give these talks, you know, we talk about that mid-ad being the workhorse. And your data reflects that. 65% of the lenses used were the mid-ad. And then we see a little splattering in the lows and a little, even less in the high.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think a lot of times, by the time those low ad candidates get to me, they've been in denial for so long that we've probably missed the opportunity for them in some cases. They've already reached the mid ad. And I'm really a big believer, and I try to preserve that summation as much as possible. I don't necessarily reach for the high ad as often as maybe the fitting guide would tell me. Shame on me. But even in this cohort, there were a couple patients who still needed it. So when you need it, you just need it, and you have to do what you have to do. So, but yeah, definitely the mid is my go-to, but every option is presented here. So it works in all different phases here.
Wonderful. Great. All right. So let's actually talk about fitting the lens. You know, as I mentioned, we're really going to get into unlocking those keys so that you can become a successful, do a refraction, determine functional ad. The only step I would tell you that might be a little bit unique is determining ocular dominance with the sensory method, but we're going to hit on each of these. If you do these in the most effective and efficient manner, you are going to get that really great success, 94 plus success with moist, and we're getting a little bit better than 97% success with 2 sets of lenses or less with our Oasis one. Well, let's go into each one. You know, so the very first step is, you know, doing that new subjective refraction in ambient light, remembering that this is a spherical lens. Our label indication, 3/4 of a diopter or less at the corneal plane. And that brings up the idea of you have to make sure that you're also vertex correcting. Vertex correct for your sphere and your cylinder. You see that one thing that we have on here about, you know, pushing the maximum plus. So in my opinion, that the kiss of death to a presbyope is over minusing. Dr. Giedd, what do you think? Is that something we need to be careful with?
Yeah, it really is. I find that if we just have that really accurate refraction to start with, and again, we always do a fresh refraction, whether we've seen the patient 3 months ago or a year ago, we always like the day of, we like to have a fresh refraction. But if you don't start from the right position, you find yourself troubleshooting a little more than you need to. And a lot of people are used to putting an extra little bit of plus in other multifocal designs. We've done the clinical trial work to find out that we don't need to do that with this product. So we will, and we're very adamant about getting that best refraction and making sure we don't over minus. And so we've kind of gone back to adapting the red-green test as one of our go-tos for making sure we're not over minusing the patient.
The red-green, there you go. Hey, I put the chart up. For a lot of us, we may not have heard or done a red-green since we were in optometry school. So Dr. Giedd, I know that you know, it would be great if you had a patient handy, and maybe you could demonstrate a red-green for us.
Certainly. In fact, there may even be a patient still here, even at 6:20 in the evening. Is there a patient here? Oh, what do you know? We just happen to have a patient. And I'm not sure if she's a presbyope. She may be in denial, but we're going to check. We're only doing, you know, the red-green now. We're just over. Her refraction is already in the phoropter magically. And so what we do is we've got that patient in the phoropter, and we've added a little bit of, usually add about a half diopter plus, just to make sure I've got them in the patient. Which letters would you say are more bold and dark and clear to you?
Red.
The ones in the red area? Okay. So we've got her in the red. We want to make sure of that. And so we'll go ahead and start adding minus and ask each time where we're at as far as red or green. And once we've reached the green, when we make that transition from red to green, we will leave her in the red because we don't want to over minus. Now, if she goes to equal and then to green, we will leave her in the equal. So I'm going to change the prescription a little bit here. Now, where are we at here? Are we in the red or the green?
Green.
So we transition one time. Okay, so sometimes I'll do it a second time. Now, which ones are bolder and darker? Which in the red area or the green area?
Red.
Red. And here's a click more. Where are we at?
Still red.
Still red. Okay, and then one more time.
More equal.
More even, and then here?
Green.
Green. So we had the equal this time. We're going to go back one click of plus and leave her right on the even for her. So we've kind of made sure that we don't over minus her at this point.
So let me just go back and just kind of reiterate a few things here. When you're doing this, you automatically put an extra plus 50 in, and you're doing that so that the red jumps out to them?
Right. Plus 50 to plus 75 is what I like to do, just to make sure I've got a solid, they can make a very solid claim at that point.
Great. And do you do this test monocularly or binocularly?
Actually, I usually do it monocularly first, but then I actually do it binocularly as well.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. That's great. And I think that's a great review. Like I said, for so many of us, we haven't probably done this since optometry school. But without a doubt, I know that if you're doing that red-green balance, you're definitely spot on with the very first step. And, you know, you want to make sure you're starting on the right step. You need that strong foundation going forward. All right. Our next step here is determine ocular dominance. And there's two ways of doing it, right, Dr. Giedd?
There are, and we have a patient here, so we're gonna demonstrate that as well. No longer need the red-green, but we all know about the sighting technique. That's what we were all taught in optometry school, at least those of us who went to optometry school a little while ago. Hopefully they're teaching the sensory dominance way now, but if not, we're here for you. But I've got her set up and we're gonna show you the sensory dominance way of doing this. So let me take the red-green away. Got to know the technology here. So I'll put 2025 letters up to start with, because that's the target. And then we know we have her in the right spot here as far as the prescription goes. Those should be pretty clear for you, correct? Okay. So I use a plus 1.25 lens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show this, the whole picture to her with binocularly, and I'm going to ask her which eye is more bothered by this plus lens in front of her. And the way you can word it any way you want. There are a lot of ways to do it, but I'll just kind of go through what I normally do. So what I want you to tell me when I put this lens in front of each eye, I want to know which eye is bothered more. The overall picture is bothered more when this lens is in front of which eye. So is the overall picture more bothered when I put this lens in front of the right eye? Or is it more bothered overall when I put it in front of the left eye? And I'll do it again. More bothered in front of the right eye, the overall picture, or more bothered in front of the left eye? Left eye. So she appears to be left eye dominant, and I think she even told me she was before. Not that we cheated, we just rehearsed a little bit. And in her case, it does match her sighting, although she tells me that she's done this before, and sometimes it's the right, sometimes it's the left. So in her case, if you were fitting her in a multifocal and you went by that, you might actually miss your opportunity to get the right eye as her dominant eye.
Great. So I'm just going to reiterate just a tiny bit. So, you know, I know what we're doing here with sensory dominance is we're simulating what we're doing if we're adding some disparity. And as you said, you're creating that disparity with that plus 1 1/4, having the patient look at it with both eyes, and whichever eye she feels most uncomfortable, like you said, in your patient's case, it was the left eye. Therefore, that was the dominant eye. That's the eye that we never, never, never want to add positive defocus. Did I get that right?
I think you did. That's perfect.
Very good.
I'm going to dismiss the patient because she's not actually a presbyope, so checking her ad will be fruitless for us. Thank you, patient.
Thank you, patient. So now we know the best distance correction. We vertex corrected. We've done our spherical equivalent. We've done sensory dominance. It now takes us to determining that functional ad. So, Dr. Giedd, what's a functional ad, and why is it important?
Well, I think all of us can relate to the fact that it's important because we all see patients walk in with prescriptions, and we look at the ad sometimes and we say, this is more ad than a person this age probably needs. But what we really want to know is how much do they actually need to do the things they need to do? And everybody's needs are specific to the individual. So, you know, I see 50-year-olds all the time coming in wearing 2 or 2 1/4 ads in their glasses. And I know that they just don't need that much, especially when I talk to them about what they do. So if we just go by what they're wearing or what that prescription they walked in with, if we use that in our fitting guide and predict our lenses that way, we're probably in many cases going to overshoot that. So we really just want to find what they need to accomplish what they do on a daily basis most of the time.
And would you mind telling us, like, step by step, how do you determine that?
Well, I do a binocular cross cylinder. That's kind of my go-to test to just kind of let me know where their accommodative system is. And once I've established that, and then in taking that into consideration, what their needs are, I'll usually go ahead and trial frame them. So we'll find out exactly where they really do most of their work. And then that'll help me decide ultimately what the final ad should be.
How about working distance? Is that important? I mean, should we be measuring that?
I think you have nothing to lose by measuring that. We certainly have measuring tapes all over the office, because when we're not sure, we're definitely going to go ahead and get some specific. And we're all going to run into patients who, you know, they'll have already measured some of those things for you. If you have patients like me, I see that not uncommon.
Are you finding patients in general are holding things out a little further?
You know, the cell phone has really, to me, become my near point card. So that is one of the big things I'm looking at. Yeah, I think a lot of people have just sort of, you know, especially if they are presbyopic, realize they have to do that a little bit anyway. But, you know, just having my own iPhone, I don't like to hold it so close. I'd rather have it a little further away. So, and a lot of these patients too, they, you know, when you overprescribe them and take away too much of that middle ground, yeah, everybody's working on a computer these days, especially in the pandemic. So you got to be careful about doing too much with the plus. And,
Sure. Yeah. And that's what I'm seeing too. There's so much computer use, which we know is more like about 20 inches away. A lot of the people who are on tablets, same thing, have a tendency to hold it a little bit further away. So I think that those years where we used to always say the working distance is 16 inches, it's 40 centimeters. I think in today's world, I don't think that's current any longer.
Right. When you see how few people are buying books or newspapers, you know, it's all device driven. And, you know, even a patient on an iPad or some sort of tablet just makes a little movement with their fingers and it's a little bigger. So I think that allows them to hold it in a more comfortable position.
Sure. So at this point, we have all the data we need. We know that distance correction, vertex corrected. We know which is the dominant eye based on sensory dominance, measured the functional ad. And then if you look, as we have here on the right, that initial lens selecting table tells you that if the ad's a 1 1/4 or less, you're putting a low in each eye. If the ad is a 150 or a 175, a mid in each eye, and a +2 and above, the mid's going in that dominant eye, and the high's going in the non-dominant eye. So you start to see where having to know that dominant eye is critical, because Dr. Giedd, in your experience, if they picked the wrong dominant eye, and if they put that high lens in the dominant eye, what have you seen would happen, or what would you expect to happen?
Yeah, that patient is going to be very unhappy with their distance vision. They're not going to be successful. So yeah, if it's that bad, then sometimes I'll even revisit the dominance test if indeed I'm in a high ad.
Yep.
I told you I'm a little bit allergic to the high ad, so that's tends to be where I go last. But again, if it's needed, it's needed.
Good. So once you've done that, you know, we always talk about send your patient out and give them about 10 minutes to adapt. What is that adaptation time? Where does that occur in your office, Dr. Giedd?
Well, if there's any interest whatsoever, that happens in my optical, where they can go ahead and shop for some glasses, which allows them really, we have a big window front to our office, so they can be looking in the distance across the street. They're looking at signage. I'm asking them to just kind of evaluate everything. They're holding a frame, maybe they're looking at arm's length, but they still maybe want to read the price tag. So they can have kind of a full experience, and it allows, you know, again, a little bit of adaptation for them to occur, because, you know, you just don't want to reevaluate these people in 1 minute. You need to let them settle into the lenses a little bit.
Great. So we bring them back in after about 10 minutes. If your patient is not thrilled with the distance, intermediate, and near, some of these tables will tell you the step-by-step of what you could do to troubleshoot that. So if you need better distance vision, the way we drive better distance vision is by dropping the ad in the dominant eye. By doing that, what will happen is you'll end up with a smaller blur circle in that dominant eye, which improves the binocular summation, better distance vision. So the low-low combination, go to the dominant eye, take the low lens out, and put either the sphere or the toric lens for that particular patient in that dominant eye. Smaller blur circle, better binocular summation. The mid-mid, same thing. Go to the dominant eye, take the mid lens out, drop to a low, and now smaller blur circle, better binocular summation, better distance vision. The only step in our system that sounds a little counterintuitive is the mid-high. If you keep going with what I've just been saying of going to the dominant eye and dropping the ad, it would take you to a low-high. That's too much disparity. We know that once you exceed 3/4 of a diopter of disparity, you go from binocular summation to binocular inhibition. So we want you to avoid that. So in the mid-high combination, you actually go to the non-dominant eye, the one wearing the high lens, and you take the high lens out and drop to a mid, but add +1/4. So if you started with the -275 high, you now have a -250 mid. Why does this work? Because having a mid ad in each eye, like I said, it decreased the disparity. You have a smaller blur circle, which is going to improve the binocular summation. The addition of that 1/4 diopter of plus keeps you at the near vision the patient was enjoying. Now, if your patient has a near complaint, one simple rule, add +1/4 to the non-dominant eye. And if you do that, that'll boost up the near vision. And again, if you pick the wrong dominant eye and added that +1/4, you're gonna have a very unhappy patient, as Dr. Giedd had mentioned.
I would add to that it never ceases to amaze me how a 1/4 diopter can make all the difference. And I've seen patients, and it sometimes just reminds me once again that the difference between success and failure can be a 1/4 diopter that it makes, so never devalue that or never think that's not worth trying.
Now, that's a great point. And it's simply because, when we created this system, we relied so heavily on summation. That's why you're getting that boost up, just as you mentioned, with that small addition. So thanks for bringing that up. All right, how about the calculator? So this is definitely a tool that we created that should enhance or make your life easier. So on the bottom here, we've got the web address that will take you directly to the calculator, jnjvisionpro.com/calculators tools. And we've got a number of resources on that site. That'll take you to the J&J Vision site, Vision Pro site, and take you to our calculators, both our toric calculator and our multifocal. On the multifocal, we've got a couple embedded videos, step-by-step, showing you how to do that sensory dominant test that Dr. Giedd had just shown. We also have an embedded video there that shows you step-by-step how to do a modified Humphreys over refraction. Now, if you do that red-green balance like Dr. Giedd showed, probably will never have to do that over refraction. But what's nice about the digital calculator is you input your sphere, cylinder, axis, age, ad, and dominant eye, push the calculate button, and it'll tell you the best set of lenses to give best overall vision. It will also give you the best set of lenses if you need enhanced distance or if you need enhanced near. Also on that site, we'll give you step-by-step instructions how to download this to your tablet, your phone, your calculator. Dr. Giedd, in your practice, is this being employed? And if so, is there anybody, do you use it? Do your technicians use it? Both?
Yeah, we have desktop computers in all of our rooms, so it's available for everybody there. I started doing clinical trials on this lens in 2012, so this fitting calculator is pretty much up here at this point. But sometimes when I get a high myope, I want to make sure with a little sill that I'm spot on, and I have a couple technicians that I do trust. Once I've done my refraction, established my dominance and my ad, then I'm certainly trusting them to plug it in and make it happen. So great, it's a good tool.
Great. And that was some of the thought process behind this. that it could either be used by the doctor, or the doctor could delegate this to some staff members. Maybe improve the efficiency in the office so the staff member could pull the lenses according to the fit calculator, and the doctor could go back into the next room. But as you mentioned, some of the benefits of this is it will automatically calculate vertex correction. It'll do your spherical equivalent. And I know we've got some of those memorized, but sometimes when we get the -9 with a diopter of cylinder, I'm definitely going to pull back and let the calculator do it for me anyway.
And that's a good point. I have fit some patients with a diopter of cylinder, even though that's not what the indication is. It has worked out pretty well, especially in the high myopes.
It does, because when you do that -9, -1 spectacle plane, once we take
it's not even that much.
Plane, yep.
Right.
Okay, we are getting pretty close to the end here, and you've given us some great tips, but I'd like to maybe pull a little bit more from those reserves, pull a little bit more from that mind of yours, Dr. Giedd. What would you give some advice if you had an extern that came into your practice, or maybe a recent grad, and they're going to go to you, the guru of fitting multifocal contact lenses? Any bits of advice you'd like to give?
Sure, and I think this is a great advice for a new grad, but even somebody who's just new to the product. And I try to do this with any product that I feel like might have a place in my practice, is to go ahead and fit 20 patients, even though we just talked about 10. My magic number is 20, and then track your results, see what it looks like. Not only will you find out if you're being successful, but you'll have established, you'll be comfortable fitting the product at that point usually too. So that's a great number. I always like to tell people to try to start out with if they're really going to invest in a product they want to know, and that's a great way to do it. So that's a big one for me. Patient expectations, setting these properly, helping patients understand that if we're meeting their goals 90 to 95% of the time, that can be considered a success, even if we have to use a little pair of reading glasses for here and there. It's interesting, I had a patient just the other day who's been a patient a long time. We've talked about multifocals for many years. She walks around with single vision lenses, and she's plussed up 3/4 of a diopter in each eye. And she has finally come to the conclusion that not only is she giving up too much distance, but now she can't quite see the close up as well anymore either. So she was like a first lens ACUVUE Oasis multifocal success. I didn't even spend 3 minutes, and she's like, "Oh, this is way better. I love them. I'm good." So, setting expectations still very important. I would also say track a couple. If a patient has a goal or two, make a note of it in their chart, so that when you see them for a follow-up, especially if they're a new wear, you can revisit that to make sure you're meeting their goals and make sure that they're not moving the goalposts on you. So those are a couple big ones for me.
Hey, any tips on looking back at some of the patients you fit? You fit some neophytes. So if you have that person who's what I would call a functional emmetrope, basically someone like me, fortunate that you had good distance vision, and they came to you on their 40th, 42nd, 43rd birthday, and your birthday gift to them was a pair of reading glasses. Any tips on fitting that functional emmetrope?
Yeah, I've had pretty good success with those patients. I wouldn't say it's quite as high as the people who, have been wearing contact lenses and they understand their vision issues a little bit more. You're dealing with people who've never had to wear anything. So I'm not afraid to fit them. Sometimes I'll end up in a lens only in one eye. But low hyperopes especially, I've been, once I can show them that a +1/2 is an improvement over their distance, I know I've got a little play. Even if the distance wasn't exactly perfect, it's certainly not going to be any worse than it was, but I will have given them some reading ability. And so catching those people early, like you said, at 40, that's really the key if they're going to become a contact lens wearer, because if you have to give them too much ad from day one, I think it's a little harder to be successful.
I have two last questions for you, Dr. Giedd. One, does it take a long time to fit multifocals?
At this point in my career, it does not. I think if you learn to delegate, you establish the basics, the fundamentals of what you need to get the right lens on the eye the first time or close to it, then this does not have to be a long process. And if you use your staff to screen your patients and know who's going to be a good candidate or who is really interested, then that can save you some time too. So, and these patients are some of the best referring people there are. If you make a couple happy, successful multifocal patients, they will tell their friends.
You stole my last question.
Sorry.
I was going to ask you about referrals, but you answered it. Perfect. Perfect. All right.
Yeah, one story in particular is a little tennis club down the road where the first two were pretty easy. Then they brought in some challenges after that, but we actually made at least 90% of them happy. And so we definitely found a very nice referral network there.
So they weren't all lobs, huh?
Yeah, well, you know, when the ball has to be clear out there and in your work, you know, close space, you know, it is a little bit trickier with a dynamic system there.
Great. All right. Well, Dr. Giedd, first of all, if you don't mind, if you would thank your patient on behalf of Johnson & Johnson.
I will.
Thrilled the fact that she was willing not only just to spend maybe a little bit more time in the office, but also to go in the limelight and hop in the chair and have to go and be our live demo patient. And second of all, thank you very, very much for the time helping to enlighten all of the attendees here. I'm sure people have gotten a couple of great pearls.
That's no problem. Happy to do it.
And thank you all for listening in. And as I mentioned, hopefully you've learned one or two items. Do your sensory dominance. Hopefully you're ready to go ahead and download that digital fit calculator and fit those multifocals. So thank you. All right, Dr. Giedd, thanks again. Looks like we've got some questions that came in. And quickly looking at them, first of all, I want to get you ready because it looks like the vast majority of these are Dr. Giedd questions.
Bring them on.
First one is going back to that red-green test. Do you do that monocular or do you do it binocular?
Yeah, I think I mentioned I definitely do it monocular, but a lot of times I'll even finish by just doing it binocularly as well, just to make sure we're binocularly balanced. So I find that works really well.
How much time do you think it takes to do?
That test alone? Oh, just a minute or two. Does not take long at all. Yeah. People really respond well to that.
And next question is another time question. This doctor was asking if it would make better sense to bring multifocal contact lens patients back on a separate day because of the amount of time commitment that it may take to fit these people. What's your thought? What do you do in your office?
These lenses, we've become so familiar with them that that's really not an issue. We do this in the normal context of an exam. They're usually already scheduled as a contact lens exam, so that's really not an issue. It may be that when you're first starting out with the lens that you want to give yourself a little more time. I think that's perfectly fine, but I think once you become familiar with the lens, that is not going to be an issue at all. Yeah, I don't think so. And again, you're going to let them go, habitually get used to the lens a little bit, sending them to your optical or wherever you go to another room, just let them hang out in the lenses a few minutes. Usually that's plenty of time to get a read on where you're at.
What do you think as far as the number of patients you need under your belt before you feel pretty comfortable or confident?
But, I think I mentioned that before. I like to give every lens that I feel like has potential in my office about 20 patients. Once I get to that point, I'm usually pretty familiar with what I have and that I can make an assessment. So I think that's a pretty good number to consider.
You've got a question in here asking, how do you check your ad? I guess
well, like I said,
do you do a 14B or fused cross cylinder, or are you doing a push-up test?
Yeah, I'm a binocular cross cylinder type of doctor. I like that as a starting point, but again, it still comes down to the functionality of the patient. So I'm more than willing to put a trial frame on and let them just show me where they're spending most of their time, and that really gives me a good idea about a starting point anyway.
Yeah, I like the push-up test, but hey, potato and potato, right?
I can do a lot of push-ups, but we're gonna stick with this.
Next question actually is one of my questions here, asking about base curve and diameter. So for this particular product, it's an 8.4 14.3, and we only have it in one base curve, one diameter. I know in our R&D, when we were doing a lot of the studies, we found we were really fitting a wide range of topographies. Dr. Giedd, any comments on that as far as, have you had any issues at all in regards to the one base curve in diameter?
Yeah, I think we mentioned this earlier, but I have fit corneas as flat as about 38.5, 39 diopters, some post LASIK patients. I know that's not off label or whatever, but and done well with that. And I've also fit steep corneas as high as maybe 48.5 diopters with no problem. So that hybrid back curve is one of the best things about this lens. And both of those ranges, the lenses still center beautifully.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Don't think about this as you would think of the spherical lenses that we've got in our portfolio, which are all spherical monocurves, just like Dr. Giedd mentioned, because of that asphericity that we have in the back curve of this hybrid back curve. That's really what's going to make this very robust as far as fitting it with a wide range of patients. We did have another question that came in here asking, maximum plus and maximum minus in these lenses. So the lens does go from a +6 to a -9.25 diopter steps. So hopefully that addresses that question. I think that's what they were asking there. Next question that came in was, why we don't recommend a high in both eyes. And as you may have recalled me talking about, when we go from a low to a mid to a high, we're adding more spherical aberration to these designs, which does give you a bigger depth of focus, but it comes at a cost. And that cost is that your blur circle's a bit bigger. So the problem is if you use a high, you're going to really suppress that distance vision quite a bit. We have fit mid-highs personally, I've fit mid-highs in pseudophakic patients. So 0 amplitude of accommodation. On some of those patients, I did have to give an extra +1/4 in the non-dominant eye. So even in those really extreme cases, really never a need for a high. And I know, Dr. Giedd, when you shared your data, very few of your patients end up in a high. Do you want to make any comment about even thinking ever about going to a high?
Oh, yeah, it's never even crossed my mind. Again, I even avoid the high when I can in patients until I really absolutely need to go there. I like to keep that binocular summation. I'll go to a mid and add a little plus, sometimes defying the fitting guide a little bit, but I've just done enough of them that's been working for me pretty well. But I always start with the fitting guide, just so you know.
Very good. Appreciate that. Here's a great question for you here too, Dr. Giedd. This person's asking, depending on your patient's functional demands, do you ever find it really necessary to drive that patient? Now this doc is asking if you have to drive the patient all the way down to an N.5. I'm not really familiar with the N gauge of near acuity, but I would imagine that's pretty tiny text. Have you ever found that you really need to see ultra small near text?
Our near point cards have a 20/20 line on them, but I never really push the patient there. If they go there on their own, I'm always happy to tell them this is a bonus. You are seeing absolutely perfect. And, a lot of times this isn't even our goal. So I don't necessarily choose that as a goal because I'm really concentrating on what their need is, what their biggest demand is. And then that's where our starting point is. And that may not be quite that small. So sometimes that's just the gravy.
We just got a question, just came in right now. This is a great one, and I'm glad they asked this. This doc is asking, if you had to pick between sighting versus sensory dominance, which one would you pick? Sometimes patients will have conflicting results, and it's a great question. And you're right, some patients will have conflicting results. If you look at the data tells us sighting and sensory match 60 to 80% of the time. So just like your question is asking, 20 to 40% of the time, they won't match. We just had a group of doctors visited us in Jacksonville, and we did a very informal test. So we had 24 doctors in there, and 37% of them, sighting and sensory, did not match. So I'll be quite honest with you, you should never do sighting dominance. Sensory dominance has such a strong correlation to success when you're doing ocular disparity. There's no reason to do sighting. Also, some new data that's come out is if you use a plus 150 instead of a plus 1, the percent of patients who cannot see a difference between the right eye and the left eye drops down to less than 1%. So sorry, I get on the soapbox a little bit on sensory dominance because I really feel strongly every optometrist should be doing sensory dominance. Hey, I just got the 5-minute warning also here, Dr. Giedd. So let me ask you a question here. Let's see, how about any feedback for changing someone from monovision into this multifocal?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to it at all. A lot of times if we're seeing a monovision patient and we're considering the multifocal, it's because they've indicated there's a reason for us to make a change for them. So in that situation, I will go ahead and do the sensory dominance test to confirm which eye is which. Because again, we don't want to miss our opportunity to identify someone who doesn't have, similar measurements for those two tests. But many of those patients have done well. I mean, I think in the 10 patient example we showed earlier, we had 2 or 3 monovision, and one of them ultimately chose to continue in monovision, but 2 of them actually switched over to the multifocal. Again, usually those patients have identified a weakness in what they're doing. They've got an issue that the monovision is not fulfilling. So that's your opportunity, to go ahead and give them a try.
Nighttime driving problems, maybe they're noticing.
Sure, just mid-range, they've gotten to the point where they're losing, arm's length stuff.
Great. When you do sensory dominance, are you doing it in the phoropter?
We touched on that sometimes you just have to because you don't have a best correction, and unless you want to put it in a trial frame. But if they have a pair of glasses that are up to date, then that's definitely ideal. Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking is because we did have a question came in asking if there's any difference in success or even the outcome. If it's in the phoropter, if it's in a trial frame, if it's in a current pair of glasses. I haven't seen a difference, but I don't know if you have.
Well, what I'll tell you is when I'm not sure, when the answers are not, conclusive and they're kind of hem-hawing a little bit, then I'll actually go ahead and put it in the trial frame, because sometimes I just think that it could be an issue. But if it's pretty solid, they're very sure of themselves and their responses, then I usually go with that, and it's done well.
Good. Got a couple more that came in here. How do you go about fitting, or what's your philosophy in fitting, or your thought in regards to fitting that emmetropic presbyope?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my success rate's quite as high as someone with refractive error, but I don't hesitate because I've had some success. I think in those cases, I tend to err on the low side for their ad, making sure I definitely do not give them too much ad. So I might even start with maybe even a little less than I need, at least to adapt. Sometimes I've had patients who, we were able to add more after they got used to the lenses. So there's, I think, more of an adaptation period for those people because they're just so used to what they're seeing with no correction at all. So I don't hesitate to do it, but I want a motivated patient. And again, I'll let them adapt to something that may not be full strength in the reading portion, and then go from there. And we've had decent success, definitely over 50%. So we'll do it. But again, motivated patient is important.
I think we have time for one last question here. I got my 2-minute warning just maybe 30 seconds ago. But this doc is asking about the maximum amount of astigmatism that you fit with the lens. Now, our label indication is 3/4 of a diopter at the corneal plane. But practically speaking, Dr. Giedd, I mean, in your office, is there a point that you say, hey, I'm not going that route?
I've definitely have fit patients with a diopter. I've probably got a few higher myopes with a little more than that. So if there are not options available, we'll try it. You'd be surprised sometimes just giving something a try works out better than you thought it might. So
especially if it's a high myop, I would imagine too.
Yeah,
right?
The higher the myop, the more willing I am to do that. Yep, you got it.
All right, it looks like we got our little warning that we're supposed to wrap it up now. So once again, I thank you, Dr. Giedd, for being on here.
No problem.
Helping us with the questions, helping us with the overall presentation. Appreciate that. And thank you to the audience for your attention. Appreciate you being here.